Hi, this is Anna Imagination with a Healing Garden. This is Shifting Perspectives. I want to welcome you. If you are new to Shifting Perspectives, this is where I talk a lot about philosophy, psychology, and now physics. And I love bringing these subjects together, standalone, and each subject is definitely beautiful, unique in its own way, but it's like food. These subjects are very much like food, so that when you bring them together, they make an entirely different concoction. I remember very much the movie Ratatouille when Remy sits there and takes a strawberry and you eat the strawberry and then you eat the cheese. And when you combine the two of them, it creates a whole new flavor. And that is exactly how I view philosophy, psychology, and physics is when you bring these three things together, it shifts the perspective so drastically with each subject that it's like this is perspective one over here with philosophy, this is perspective two over here with psychology, and this is perspective three with physics. And the problem that we end up getting a lot of is people step into all different perspectives. A person will go to be a physicist, a psychologist will go to be a psychologist, a philosopher, well, most of those people don't exist anymore. And to stand in all three positions and to bring them all together creates something entirely new. It allows you to go, oh wow. And I've heard the word holistic a lot in reference to this concept. The problem is holistic is a word that really has branched off to mean natural. And I know that's not the actual definition, but that's the connotation it has. So when we hear the word holistic, we immediately think, oh, they're going to be into herbs and they're going to be into. So even though holistic means all encompassing, that's not what we're thinking of it anymore. We're thinking, oh, this person is going to be focusing on just herbs and they're going to ignore the science. They're going to ignore. So for a while, I used the healing garden, holistic healing. And I decided that there wasn't enough emphasis on the philosophy or the psychology in that. So I played around with the name a few times and I keep settling on just, I need to call this the healing garden. So, that being said, it's really, really important that we expand our perspective and accept a lot more into this because there's when a person, an individual, when you really sit back and examine what a person is, you have the body. Well, that's pretty easy. That's just straightforward medical. And we know this. That was the easy, cut dry, we figured that out like 4,000 years ago. So thank you, Egypt. So that's body. The other side of all of that though is the soul. And that's where we get into a lot of opinion because it is very much an opinion. There is no metric to measure any of this. It's all our own perspective, our own hypothesis, and our own view on thing. So for soul healing, I like to refer to that as spiritual. Some people take it as far as religion. Some people just dabble, but it's very much spiritual. And I've been in the ethereal arts since I was 4 years old. I've been really tuned into the energy pool. But, and I was very religious right up until I was 15 years old. As soon as I studied philosophy, 6 months later, my religion ended. Like I was baptized at 13, and then at 15, I very much embraced philosophy. And it was funny because the reason why I went into philosophy was because I was adamant that it would actually take me back to God. That was my goal. I I remember starting it, picking it up, going toward it, and I received a lot of hate, a lot of anger and rage from the religious group I was in. And they informed me that it was unholy, it was a sin to study philosophy. And I kept asking the nagging question, what are you afraid of? If your faith is that, and I said this to them, is your faith that weak that you are threatened by philosophy and questions? Like, what are you trying to hide? A God who claims to be all powerful shouldn't be threatened by the study of philosophy. So either you're hiding something or you're just not as faithful as you think you are. So I stepped into philosophy with the full confidence that my pursuit of God would take me back to God. I believed that at the end of my philosophical journey, I would find God. And I did. It took me a lot longer, but I did. The journey was a stop. I can't even begin. 6 months in, 6 months, I I looked into existentialism, and I found this massive breakdown of what matter was and what we are, and I stopped believing in God. 6 months in. And I remember thinking, oh, this is why they didn't want me to study philosophy, because it literally proves that God does not exist. At that stage, I was in stage 6 perspective at that point. And it wasn't until this year, well, 2022, that I finally found my way back to God. It's not what I thought it was, but I did find my way back. And that's when I realized, and prior to that, from 1995, that's when I started, from 1995 to 2022, I was absolutely a diehard atheist. And it wasn't until I got to, well, 2022, that I discovered spirituality. And coming from a Southern Fundamental Baptist church, I couldn't even, I never realized that spirituality was separate than religion. So in 2022, when I found my way back to spirituality, when I found my way in spirituality, I went, oh, this is spirituality. Oh, and I realized there was this massive segment of just healing that wasn't talked about in psychology, was not talked about in any of the sciences. And if anything, physics actually touches on it. Physics very much, in my opinion, physics and spirituality are very closely related. And I had studied physics. So when I found my way back to spirituality and it was starting to come together, I was going, holy shit, this is just physics. It's like spiritual people feel the physics. I'm going to love this analogy. I'm going to stick with this. All right. Give me a minute here. Spiritual people can feel the physics, and physicists are poking at the physics. And that's really the difference between the two groups, is without seeing it, without having any knowledge, spiritual people can feel it. And it's like spiritual people, I call them ethereal walkers, or Fey touched. That's what I refer to them. Take my names. I love them. Fey touched or ethereal walkers. That is what I refer to them as. And both of those people very, very much can feel the force of gravity. They can feel force and energy. They can feel magnetization. They can feel the electromagnetic field in the planet. They can feel physics. And physicists, I don't know if physicists, I mean, I'm sure there's some people who are like, I'm certain of it, because that's why I picked up physics, is all right, I'm done feeling all this shit. I want an explanation. That's why I really went, okay, now I want a well-rounded, full education in physics. Before it was, let's just study frequency. Let's just study this. And I had a basis in physics when I was in high school, but I am wanting more than just that. So recently, when I started my actual physics studies, now I'm like, all right, let's get into this. I want to know what's poking at me. And that's funny, because that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like when you're a spiritual person, the physics pokes at you. But when you're a physicist, you poke at the physics. That's it. That's the difference. I'm sticking with that. When you are an empath, or a Fey touched, or an ethereal walker, or a light worker, physics pokes at you. And physicists are the people who decide to poke back. That's the difference. So that's spirituality and physics. And I am 100% certain, and I'm starting to pull psychology into this when it comes to manifestation. The manifestation is actually just poking at physics. It's very much physics. Manifestation and physics are like the same topic, but people aren't aware of that. There's a lot of ethereal walkers who are like, manifest this, but they don't know what they're doing. And with my study in physics, I'm going, you're talking about magnetism, you're talking about energy, you're talking, hello, people, this is physics. So, and it's funny, because when I sat down and started studying psychology, well, not started, when I dove deep into this branch that of perspective psychology. And I opened up the door to the cognitive core, and I started looking at the processing of the cognitive core. And I saw that one section that's scarcity and abundance. There's a section in our brains that measures scarcity and abundance. And every time we get a perspective change, every time we get new information in, we weigh it against scarcity and abundance. And when we weigh it against scarcity and abundance, we are literally accessing the energy pool and physics, and we're poking at it every time. So whenever we gain something, now this is the extraordinary thing. So you have this cognitive core, and I break it down in like so many of my videos. I'm not going to break it down here. At this point, I think I'm just going to include a link down below for my notes, because every time in the past I've said this, I end up in a 30-minute explanation of what the cognitive core is. And I'm at a point where I'm tired of talking about it unless I'm actually talking to somebody. So I'm going to just provide a link down below from now on showing you, if you want to know more about the cognitive core, link below. So the cognitive core, when we get something, we basically weigh it against two things. The first one is our defense system. And then the second thing is the scarcity versus the abundance. We're weighing it in on that. Is this going to add to the scarcity? Is this going to add to the abundance? Is it going to stay neutral? And depending upon which way this goes, depends upon whether or not we're going to celebrate or whether or not we're going to get depressed because we have loss. And this is going on in our brains every time we gain new information from the news, from the media, from bulletin boards, from people, from media, you name it, from TikTok videos. Every time we gain data. Yesterday, I gained the data that owls have ears. I got to see an owl ear yesterday. I had no idea they even had ears. I feel like an idiot because, of course they have ears. They have ears, and somebody on this Facebook reel pulled very gently, I know birds, pulled back the flap, and you could see inside, like you could see the owl ear, which looked like a beak, by the way. And you can't even, it's like hidden in the fluff of their fuzz, the fluff of their fuzz. So that was new data. I'm a birder. I'm a huge birder. So I'm so much of a birder that I use the word birder. So birders are bird watchers, but we don't call ourselves bird watchers because that sounds like I'm an old person with really with plaid pants with binoculars. I have binoculars for bird watching, but that's not the point. I'm a birder, and we don't call ourselves bird watchers. In fact, no one in the community calls ourselves. We have a community. We are a people. We don't judge me. We have a people. We have a community. And we have so we don't call ourselves bird watchers. We bird watch, but that's not what we are. Birders. That's what we call ourselves, birders. And I'm a birder. I'm a birder. It sounds like a burner, but I'm that too. But birder, I'm a birder. And so for me to see this owl ear is like, wow. So now my question is, do hummingbirds, do they have this? And I have held so many baby birds in my hands. Birds come to me. Like I can pick up wild animals. It's great. A very, very honoring. It's an honor. And I never ever thought, this is probably why I had the honor of examining the bird. It was more of a rescue mission. I have so many bird stories. So, God, I miss my birds. Okay, but I received data. I received data about this owl ear, and that went into my cognitive core for processing. And I was going, okay, I have more information. First of all, owls have ears. Yes, owls have ears. New information received. So then my processing went into all of this, and it said, okay, is this a loss or a gain? Well, this is gain. This is a gain. I gain information so that now I know they can hear me. They can hear me. So now I know to be extra quiet when I bird watch. Yeah, I had no idea that I knew I don't know. I thought it never occurred to me because you can't see their ears. So I went, all right, this is going to change how I bird watch. Yes, this is going to change a lot about how I bird watch. All right, this is a gain. So I was joyous because I gained information. That's the anger or joy. Are we going to get defensive? We're not going to get defenses. Our defenses are not going to raise up. The army can chill out and have some coffee. I don't need you for this. Thank you. And my defense system like chilled out and went, all right. I see a bunch of soldiers in like armor from the 16th century. All right, we'll go have that coffee. And they all walk off with their spears. And I just instead have a celebration. Yay, more information. And that adds to my abundance. So now I'm elated and I'm joyous and I'm like, oh, everything's great because I found out about owl ears. And now I'm here. This is now the normalizing stage where I'm telling you about these owl ears. Wow, this is amazing. Did you know that owls have ears? And they look like beaks. It was really bizarre. Like they opened right up. It was really bizarre. So that all being said, that happens. Oh no, my birds are back. Did I manifest them? I have birds in my kitchen. We'll talk about that in a minute. Oh no, they're back. Oh, please don't be back. Okay, well, focus. So I swear I manifested them. I have a nest of starlings nesting above my stove so that if I'm not like the window's open and when she starts feeding, well, when the birds start feeding their fledglings, they'll fly into my kitchen. This is normal for me, birder. So I have to like accumulate my birds and put them back outside. And then they drop their grubs. It's gross all over my kitchen. And I'm just like, why'd you drop they fly into my kitchen and they drop their worms and then they leave. I'm like, you assholes. But they are European starlings nesting in the vent above my stove. And I don't know who to call to get rid of them. And you can't actually, it's illegal to move birds in New York State because, well, unless they're invasive, and they are, so I might be able to, but I don't know. It hurts the planet if I move them, but they are invasive. So I have birds nesting in my kitchen, which is nice. And at the same, they come to me. My birds come to me. I don't have to go like no binoculars at all. So that all being said, it's data that goes into the cognitive core and you process it. So when you have the cognitive core, you have an overall filter. It's like a sleeve that the fear system wraps, saran wrap around the cognitive core. And when the filter is set to, this is a really great example. It's a whole filter. The whole cognitive core is set to optimism. You are going to most likely see abundance even in loss. And if you have it set to pessimism, you are most likely going to see negativity in gains. That's the difference. And then there's that one beautiful person who goes, I'm neither, I'm a realist. Those people exist. And they pride themselves on the fact that they're realists. Let me tell you something about those people. Those people are accurate at foreshadowing. Those people are accurate at forecasting. That's what those people are. They are just excellent at forecasting. Forecasting is a supply and demand term when you do inventory. I used to be a purchasing agent and then a purchasing manager. So this is my language. When you are in sales and you are working for a business, you have to project what supplies you need to keep the business running. So they bring in people who are called buyers. This was my wake-up call when I realized that my life path was not the right one for me. My dream was to be a buyer. More than anything in the world, I wanted to be a purchasing manager. I wanted to be a buyer. Well, I got my dream. Within 9 months, I manifested it, and I was a purchasing manager of the largest plastic company in the world. And I hated it. I went for 20 years. I wanted this. I moved to New York City. I become it. I'm it. I was making $80,000 a year, and I hated it. It was so meaningless to me. So I quit. I got fired because I ghost quit. I absolutely quiet quitted. And by then I was actually working full time at the Healing Garden. I was putting the Healing Garden together. And that's what I was doing during my working hours. I was ghost quitting. I was quiet quitting because I was just so miserable that at my office, I started putting together outlines for the Healing Garden and I stopped doing my job. I stopped like I did bare minimum because there was no passion in it. And I was just seeking passion so desperately that I just fueled it and directed it over into the healing garden because that emotionally gave me reward. I lost the job. No loss. I'm thrilled of it. But they have something in that called forecasting. And that's when you look at sales reports and you analyze this is how much we used last year. This is how much we're going to project to use this year. This is the trend at the moment. And based on these numbers, I saw a 50% growth. Therefore, based on that calculation, we're going to need this amount. And that's called forecasting. So when you go through your cognitive core with data that comes in, you're actually forecasting. Now you're because you're predicting the future. You're saying, is this going to be a loss or a gain? And if it's a loss, you are predicting that you are going to lose more than you have. And if it's a gain, you are predicting that you are going to gain more than you have. And for the people who boast that they're realists and they look at the situation as it is, what they are really doing is they're just really good at accurate predictions. That's all. They're forecasting accurate predictions. And because an optimist will always they will over assess how much the gain. They think there's a gain, or they assume that there's too much gain. A pessimist will assume there is no gain, or will predict that there's more. I'm sorry, I misspoke. A pessimist will assume that there is a loss or predict there is more loss than there really is. And somebody who's neutral will just accurately predict, and they'll usually be spot on, and it doesn't flux positive or negative. It might still be a positive, but the positive will be accurate. And that's the difference between an optimist and a pessimist. But when you are, and that's really it, you do want to be a realist because you do want to be able to make accurate predictions, but you do also want to be able to see the optimistic side of things, because when you don't, you will manifest that shit. And if you're walking around saying, I'm terrible, I'm horrible, I am always a loser, I always fail, well, you're manifesting that you'll always fail. You become a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what layman self-fulfilling is. That's the common term for it, is self-fulfilling prophecy. Self-fulfilling prophecies are manifestation. So that's that. So I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I had a point. Right. I was talking about mind, body, soul, and I didn't get to mind yet. This is all just on the soul. So when it comes to healing, you also have the mind, and that's where the subconscious mind and the psychology comes into place. And for our resources right now, we have psychology, but I have a lot of anger, a lot of upset at the psychology field as a whole. And a lot of people go into psychology for answers, and they'll be there for a very long time. They'll get discouraged, or it won't work for them. They will go into it and they will be disheartened and they'll just quit. And I just need to very bluntly explain the core of my anger. When I went into therapy, I had a woman who was very good. She was so good that she was able to diagnose me without even talking to me. It was all data that was passed down between me and through my husband. She's the one who spotted that I needed a therapist, and she gave a lot of information. She basically used my then husband to not manipulate, but guide me to get into therapy. I didn't realize it then. We would pass messages back and forth. It was actually very psychologically, you're not supposed to do this. According to the ethics of the government, she was breaking laws. Well, if you want to say that the government even has ethics. She was doing things that basically she was not supposed to do. She could have lost her job if she had been found out. But she recognized something in me, and she started passing on messages. Basically, she was my husband's therapist. And in talking to her about what I do, mind you, I was homeschool, or I was self-taught, and I was just dabbling in my living room or my bedroom. I had just been doing this for 20 years at that time. But he had passed on some of my insights to her. And she was like, get her into therapy. And it was her and I passing messages back and forth for a few weeks. And it was her that made me go, okay, if this woman, she was good. She was good. And I went, if this woman thinks that I need therapy, then I need therapy. So I did go into therapy, and she had given a list of diagnoses that she gave to my then husband. And with my knowledge, I turned around and said, I have these diagnoses. And my diagnosis matched this woman's. I walked into therapy, and my therapist immediately said, you don't have borderline personality disorder. They gave me bipolar instead. I said, no, I don't. That's bullshit. That is bullshit. They're like, well, you're manic. Yes, I have ADD. But they didn't diagnose that. The other woman did, but not this woman. I diagnosed it. I went, I have ADD. They're like, oh, no, you don't. Yeah, I do. No, you have bipolar. Okay. And then they said that I did have depression. I did get the diagnosis for depression, but I had that diagnosis since I was 16 years old. So I knew I had depression. So when you have ADD and depression, you go really manic and then you go really low. And then you go really manic and then you go really low, because the ADD and they toggle. And they also diagnosed me with suicidal ideation, which is part of borderline personality disorder. I knew, like, there was just so much. It was just blaring. So it was 2 years of me arguing with my therapist, and she insisted I did not have borderline. She's like, well, they did diagnose you with bipolar. And she said, I don't think you have bipolar. I said, I know I don't have bipolar, but they put me on bipolar meds. Now I was pissed. I'm like, you false diagnosed me. Now you're giving me medication for bipolar. And I ended up taking the medication, lamotrigine. Lamotrigine caused my hypothyroidism. That's what they don't tell you. So I ended up on medication, and 6 months later, I ended up with thyroid issues. So I go to my doctor, and my doctor's like, well, what prescriptions are you on? And I said, lamotrigine. And she went, oh, well, that explains your thyroid issues. Lamotrigine causes hypothyroidism. Great. So now I have to take levothyroxine for the rest of my life because I was on lamotrigine. Because they gave me a mood stabilizer for for bipolar, which I didn't have. So it came down to 2018. I was on these meds for 3 years. And my husband he wanted his own children. So this is the part where I was forced, I was breeding. I was bred. And he put me through 3 IVF treatments and a surgery. Now, if I was going to get pregnant and they're pumping me with estrogen and progesterone, I needed to come off my meds. So I told them, look, I need to come off all the meds. And they're like, you are in the middle of your therapy and you're coming off these meds? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine. And they're like, you have bipolar. Do I? So they came up with a plan, a massive emergency. When she comes off these meds, shit's going to hit the fan. And nothing happened. They took me off the meds. They all did a whole brace for impact, and nothing happened. And they're like, what? Yeah, what? And they're like, well, I'm surprised you don't have a response or a reaction because of the bipolar that I told you I don't have. Because I was off the meds now, and they had no response to me coming off the med. It was no difference at all. They were forced to acknowledge, based on the chemistry now, oh, she doesn't have bipolar. No fucking shit. So they caused my hypothyroidism. They misdiagnosed me. They still refused to look at my borderline personality disorder. And they told me I should not research the disease. And I'm going, what the hell? It's not a disease. They told me I should not research it. And I'm like, okay, all right. And I didn't. I had not sat down and done any borderline personality work yet, not extensively. Now, just so you know, borderline has 9 symptoms. It's not hard. It's 9 symptoms. 9. If you have 5 or more, you've got borderline. That's how it works. So if you have the ability to read, you can diagnose yourself with borderline because you just read these 9 symptoms and you figure out which ones apply to you. That's it. And I had 8 of the 9 symptoms. 8. Now, the reason why this is so important is because in therapy, All mental disorders can be handled and treated through cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically a fancy term for meditation, except borderline personality disorder. So I'm cognitive behavioral therapying the shit out of my brain, and symptoms aren't going away, which I knew because I did not have bipolar, because I had borderline and they refused to diagnose me. So in 2018, when I came off the meds and they went, oh shit, we done fucked up. Well, your diagnosis forced me to get onto a medication that I didn't need that's now caused hypothyroidism. So thank you so much for that. So I then turned around and I ended up with another therapist. People retired and I went through 3 more therapists. The next one argued with me, insisting, you don't have borderline. And I walked in there with the very next therapist going, look, examine me for borderline. You don't have borderline. You don't have. Next one came along. Examine me for borderline. No, you don't have. I was getting pissed. The 4th one came along and she went, well, everything's a spectrum. So you might have borderline tendencies. God, I hate hearing that word. You might have borderline tendencies, but you don't have borderline. Now, all I wanted was dialectical behavioral therapy, which basically is formal argument and debate mixed with cognitive behavioral therapy, so you can eliminate the borderline. So she comes in and she finally admits that I might have something like that. So she starts talking to me a little bit about it. And after about 6 months, she went, okay, you have borderline. So it wasn't until 2020 that I finally got the diagnosis that I told them I needed to have 5 years ago. It took 5 years for them to diagnose me. And it took me walking in and said, you know, it's interesting. I found this article online that borderline personality disorder is not recognized as an actual condition according to the DSM-5. And my therapist did one of these. And that if the insurance company does not validate that it is an actual condition, they won't cover it medically. So therapists often don't diagnose borderline personality disorder. So I don't get a bill. And she just sank in her chair and went, yes, that's true. So you're telling me I haven't been diagnosed with borderline personality since 2015 because you're concerned about my finances more than my mental health? And she went, yeah, that happens a lot. PTSD and ADD, ADHD are acknowledged by insurance companies. I said, so you're telling me that an insurance company decided to tell me what my medical conditions were? And she basically said, yes. So that is why I have a problem with psychology. That is why I have a problem with diagnosis. That is why I have a problem with how it's all handled. Now, that all being said, as soon as she gave me the go-ahead, as soon as she went, yes, you have borderline, I was able to go, thank you, now I'm going to get to work. I was able to get rid of my borderline in a few weeks because dialectical behavioral therapy is just formal argument and debate with meditation, which I had 30 years of philosophy, and philosophy teaches formal argument and debate. So I already had all the tools. I just needed the go-ahead. I just needed the confirmation. And when I was done, I felt invalidated. Now let's talk about that. I felt invalidated for saying, and I want to ask everybody out there, how many times did you know you had something? And you go to the therapist and you tell them and they say, no, you don't. How invalidating does that feel? Borderline did not have some magical metric. It was 8 lines on a paper that you read and say, oh, look, that applies to me. That sounds like me. That sounds like me. But they're lording this over us like, oh, you don't have the degree, so you can't diagnose. Well, you don't have the metrics, so you can't diagnose, is really what I wanted to say back to them. And in fact, I did to my therapist many times. Like, you understand that there's no metric. There's no metric. You can't sit there and grab the chemistry brain. You can't sit there and study this. You don't know. It's hypothesis. The whole damn thing of diagnosis is hypothetical. It's a therapist, it's a psychologist observing and then going, what I observed in my perspective was this. That's all it is. It's just hypothetical. And I'm going, because somebody made an hypothesis and they wrote down these 8 symptoms, these 8 descriptors, because of this insurance company, because of this bullshit that is bipolar, every case that I have seen it's just ADD or ADHD with depression. And they have perspective, they have cognitive dissonance, basically. They have multiple perspectives crammed into their brain. So that causes the mood swings. So they're constantly jumping between which perspective do I follow, mine or somebody else's, mine or somebody else's. And depending upon the severity of the cognitive dissonance, depends upon the severity of the mood swing. You can also have multiple perspectives. You can have more than 2. You can have 3 or 4. So, for instance, you could have the perspective of your father, the perspective of your mother crammed into your mind, and your own perspective. So while you value A, you're being told to value B and then C. It's going to be confusing. So you jump between all 3 of them all the time because your cognitive core is going, which programming behavior do we follow? Do we follow A or do we follow B? Let's do all of them. And because your cognitive core cannot figure out which perspective is right, it assumes that all of them are right and it follows all of them. Actually, it doesn't. It destroys your perspective because that's not safe. So then it focuses on your parents' perspective. But your identity is being drawn to your own perspective. So you end up toggling between all these different perspectives. Perspective abuse. So that is what bipolar is. Every case that I have seen of bipolar, that is really what it is people don't have mood swings. What they have is altered perspectives inside their head that isn't theirs, and they're too afraid to act like themselves. So they're trying to be loyal to a perspective that they don't actually value. So they jump. And that's the problem. That's where I'm having an issue. That's where I'm going. The amount of unethical bullshit from the psychology field. And it's not just me. I have heard stories like this so many times. I have people coming into my garden and I'll talk to them. And the very first thing I hear is, I tried therapy. It doesn't work. I have seen prolonged suffering because of therapy, because of the traditional psychology field. So I am on this massive real anger toward it because it's not helping people. In many cases, it's invalidating them. And at the end of the day, I'm going, first of all, if a person thinks they have PTSD, and this is something else. I have 3 children. All 3 of them have been in therapy. My oldest received the diagnosis for PTSD, and my daughter, both of my daughters received the diagnosis for PTSD. My son did not. Now, I'm going to tell you, my son has PTSD, but my son did not get the diagnosis. And I sat down and I talked to his therapist about it. And his therapist confirmed he has PTSD, but I believe that in giving him the actual diagnosis, it's going to enhance and make his condition worse, because he will use it as a means to sympathize, or he will use it as a means to play the victim. And that is common. People will hear about their diagnosis and go, oh my God, this is a hindrance. So I can understand that. Now I ask the question, and I agree with it, but now I'm asking the question, why are you discussing diagnosis at all with patients? Why are patients even getting it? Now, the reason why is because a person must understand their behavior in order to process what happened to them. But if that's not being handled properly, then you've given them a diagnosis for no reason, and it's not being handled properly. The focus of how to walk a person through conversation isn't being done properly. So you have a lot of people who are focusing on this without actually making progress. But they've got the diagnosis now. So there are a lot of people who do use it for validation purposes. And that's really, diagnosis is validation. That's really the core of it. And it is very validating. It's like this massive, oh, thank God, now I know what's wrong with me. That's it right there. Because I was there. I did it too. As soon as I got my diagnosis, it was clarity. A diagnosis resulted in clarity. But our psychology around what a diagnosis actually is, why did I need a therapist to give me that information? I felt the same relief when I read it in a book and went, oh, well, that explains so much. Now I understand me. I have so much more to say on this, but I'm not going to get into it right now because I can talk easily for another 90 minutes just on this topic, and I'm already at 40. So, and that's really the only reason why I'm not going to go on about this, is because because I'm out of time. So I will definitely be talking about this more, but diagnosis does give us clarity. It does tell us what is wrong with us. It explains the behavior. And I talk about this often. I had two marital affairs. And the first one was because it was borderline personality disorder. And I was having an impulse need of have sex with this person to keep me safe. And then the other one that I had was well, my alter fell in love with somebody. So that was multiple personality disorder, falling in love. And that's it. Like they felt different. The two affairs felt completely different. And I had talked to other people about their affairs, and I saw a lot of people having affairs for borderline personality disorder. The impulse and the need, the drive, the I can't explain it. It's an impulse urge. Yep, I get that. I have to have sex to stay safe. Sex meant safety. That is exactly what it meant. Sex meant safety in my mind. And once I understood how the mind works and what that was, my brain went, "Oh, okay. All right. So that calmed down. That made sense." And that's really it, isn't it? We associate bad behavior with safety. We associate being cut or being beaten as being safe. That is the programming our subconscious mind puts into our brains. That my being raped actually kept me safe. Because when I was raped, when I was having sex, the man wasn't beating me. So my brain learned that a man who was having sex with me was less likely to hurt me. So yeah, it was very much choosing between being raped or being beaten, and I chose rape almost every time because my brain processed that sex equaled safety. And then when I felt in danger, I had to have sex to reassure. It was my comfort. Not that it was my comfort, but my subconscious mind associated, you got to find safe, you got to be safe, go get safe, go have sex. And that finally broke recently in 2022. In 2021, 2022, that finally broke. And that's when I went celibate. And I was able that was safety. Oh my God, when I discovered that I could just not have sex and I discovered celibacy, like that's where I am now and I love it. I'm like, no, 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 no. I could do this for the rest of my life. Like I love it. And but that's the kind of crap that our subconscious mind does to us. It absolutely tweaks it in that way. So it's interesting. But for me, this is fantastic for putting everything in working order. It's this extraordinary, just trying to gauge this huge big picture. And it's like we have this pursuit of the big picture. And we do. That's why we have physicists. That's why we have people studying science. That's why we have people studying astronomy and the Hubble telescope is we are seeking the big picture. We want to understand the big picture. Once you have the big picture, you understand where you are. That was my driving pursuit for psychology and philosophy. I wanted the big picture. I wanted to understand, okay, break down my brain, show me why we do what we do. And when I created perspective psychology, that was all I wanted was the big picture. And I found it. And when I found it, it clicked everything into place. And now it's like this. I feel like Neo walking through the matrix going, all right, I'm going to flex. And I see perspectives. I can see all of the perspectives. And I can choose and move and shift and take on the perspective of each person I speak to now. So I know, oh, I'm talking to a level 2 perspective. Oh, I hate using the word level. I hate using the word level. It's a stage because level sounds like it's hierarchy. And I hate that. There's no hierarchy. So I'll talk to a stage 2 or I'll talk to a stage 4. And I can see me shifting in all of those. And I know how they see me. I have stage 2s who look at me. I have stage 5s who look at me. Stage 6s, stage 6s. Stage 6s, I don't want to talk about that. But and that's just it is it's very much it's very much a big picture. It's very much getting that massive, trying to figure out where we are so we can relate in the universe. It's absolutely very powerful stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here because I'm at that crux where if I keep talking, I'm going to open up a whole new topic and I need to close it down. So my master classes begin on Monday, the 14th of August, and I'm currently having a sale for 98% off. Jump on over there, get on a call with me, and we will do a I'll break down your healing journey plan to confirm that you have a plan in place. And this is a free service I offer everybody. Just book a call with me and I will go over your healing journey plan. If you have one already, great. Let's make sure it's completely filled in. Because a lot of people focus on just holistic methods. A lot of people focus on just spirituality. And then other people just focus on body. They don't focus on, or they just focus on psychology and they don't take into account the big picture. So my healing journeys cover everything. It is all encompassing. And it's a full plan to make sure that you are doing everything to not miss a part. So when you heal, you're healing everything equally on the same path, and it greatly expedites your healing. So you're not spending 20 years in therapy. So if you already have a plan, great. Let's go over it to make sure that it is well-rounded. If you don't have a plan, you really should have one, which is why I offer this free to everybody. So get on a call with me. We'll get you your healing journey plan. And anyone who books a call with me gets my free Try to Healing starter pack. It's everything you need to get you kickstarted in the right direction. And the link for that is down below. Just book a call with me. And I do have my master classes on sale right now for 98% off. And that ends on Monday when the classes begin. So take a look at that. And that is all set. Subscribe to my channel, subscribe to my newsletter. Thank you so much. And may the kindest of words always find you.